Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
And good morning on this Sunday. So much to talk about today. We begin with the reaction to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It started early Thursday morning. Russian military forces launching the assault. Most of the world has responded with outrage and condemnation. The United States and allies announced what President Biden calls the most severe sanctions ever on Russia.
As we respond, my administration is using the tools, every tool at its disposal, to protect American families and businesses from rising prices at the gas pump. You know, we're taking active steps to bring down the cost, and American oil and gas companies should not exploit this moment to hike their prices to raise profits.
We want to get you some immediate reaction now from Indiana members of Congress. Democrat Andre Carson said this is a clear power grab, an act of aggression that would destabilize the world. The U.S. must continue doing all we can to stop this war and hold Russia accountable. Fellow Democrat Frank Mervin from northwestern Indiana said this: Russia's violation of the core principles that have maintained world peace in Europe since the end of World War II must be a shared responsibility and met with definitive actions taken by NATO and its allies. And from Republicans, Congresswoman Jackie Walorski says Vladimir Putin chose war and he must be held accountable. This is the time to meet Putin's horrific actions with crippling sanctions and serious consequences. And we welcome in Congressman Larry Bush on now. Congressman, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. You've seen the video, the pictures coming out of Ukraine. Are you surprised that Putin actually went ahead and did this?
I am a little bit surprised. I did think he would just recognize a certain area of eastern Ukraine and then stick to that. But because I think it's a huge mistake for him to do this. I mean, it's against international law. It's a sovereign country. And, I think the United States and our NATO allies are going to be aggressive in defending our NATO countries surrounding the Ukraine. And we're going to do everything we can to help the Ukrainians defend their country against the aggression of Vladimir Putin. And I think the international community has reacted strongly against his actions. And the United States, I think, now is putting more and more sanctions on his financial institutions and other areas of his economy, including individual citizens and oligarchs, and that's appropriate. So it's really the biggest invasion really probably since World War II in Europe, and I don't think the international community is going to stand for it.
Do you think the U.S. should be sending troops?
I don't think the U.S. should be sending troops into the Ukraine. Ukraine is not a NATO country, as you probably know. Under Article 5 of the NATO Charter, if it was a NATO country, we would be sending troops to fight back. But we're not legally bound to do that, and I don't think it would be appropriate for us to do that. I do think it is appropriate to put troops in the NATO countries surrounding the Ukraine and in Eastern Europe to protect our NATO allies. And I think it is appropriate to send lethal weapons to the Ukrainians and help them defend themselves, which we're also doing. We got off to a little bit of a slow start, but now I think we're doing some of the appropriate things we need to do to get more weapons to help the Ukrainians defend themselves.
I've seen a lot of talk on social media and even from Republicans blaming President Biden for this. Your thoughts on that? Is the timing on that good?
Well, I mean, I think there's a couple of things. First of all, I do think that the Biden administration's stance towards American energy production, particularly oil and natural gas, is the wrong approach, because geopolitically, that was one of the leverage points that we had on the Russians, that we had the ability to produce more natural gas, liquefied natural gas and oil to help Eastern Europe with their dependency on Putin. And we're stymieing that in the United States under the administration. So I think that's a mistake. Secondly, I do think that we should have put sanctions a little bit earlier. But like I said earlier in my comments, I think the administration is realizing that they need to be more aggressive, and we're doing some of the right things. I think more sanctions are appropriate. Show strength by putting more troops in our NATO ally countries, which we are doing. But, we really need to unleash American natural gas, particularly, and help the Eastern Europeans decrease their dependency on Russian natural gas. that gives us geopolitical leverage, which now is in the hands of Putin.
But the blame game stuff, the timing.
I don't think we
your
should. I don't
thoughts?
think that. Yeah, I don't think it's appropriate to be putting the blame game on anyone right now. I mean, there are some people on the Democrat side of the aisle blaming President Trump. And come on, this is a difficult international situation, and I've said at this point, I think the administration is catching up. I think I would have been more aggressive on sanctions and maybe earlier, and shown more strength, and also unleash American energy production to help Eastern Europe. But the reality is right now we need to band together with our NATO allies and the international community and condemn this and make sure the Ukrainians can defend themselves.
Congressman, I have one more question before I let you go, and I appreciate you taking some time as always. Should President Vladimir Putin remain in power when this is all said and done?
Well, unfortunately, I think he will. And, when you go to Eastern Europe, which I have, the propaganda machine from the government in Russia is pretty staunch. I mean, unlike here, where people like yourself and other journalists can, carry a message, over there, it's only the government. The information the people get is only from Vladimir Putin and his allies in the government. And so they're being told that the Western nations, NATO, and the Ukrainians are a security threat to Russia, which is just a ridiculous statement. But that's all the Russian people know. So I think he'll probably stay in power. I mean, I don't think they get as much information as they need to understand that he's making a big mistake.
Yeah, we'll see how all of this plays out. Congressman Larry Bucshon, thank you for joining us, sir.
No, you're welcome anytime. Thank you.
Coming up, the president makes his choice for the next justice on the United States Supreme Court. And state lawmakers fired up over a bill to end the gun permit requirement in Indiana. Those stories next on All Indiana Politics. Welcome back to All Indiana Politics on this Sunday. Let's go right to those other big stories that we're following. President Biden has picked his nominee for the U.S. Supreme Court. He wants federal appeals court Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to replace retiring Justice Stephen Breyer. If confirmed by the Senate, she would be the first black woman to serve on the nation's highest court.
And someone with extraordinary character will bring to the Supreme Court an independent mind, uncompromising integrity, and with a strong moral compass and the courage to stand up for what she thinks is right. For too long, our government, our courts, haven't looked like America. And I believe it's time that we have a court that reflects the full talents and greatness of our nation.
Senator Mike Braun has not said which way he might vote. His official statement: as I have said, I will consider President Biden's nominee to the Supreme Court based on if he or she has demonstrated respect for our Constitution rather than a desire to legislate from the bench. And I look forward to examining Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's record with a level of respect that was denied other recent court nominees. A similar statement from Senator Todd Young. He tells us Supreme Court nominees deserve a thorough and fair vetting, and I will approach this process with the seriousness it deserves. I look forward to reviewing Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's record to evaluate whether she is committed to upholding the Constitution and to ensure she will not legislate from the bench on our nation's highest court. And take note of this. Both Senator Young and Senator Braun voted no on Brown Jackson's nomination to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals in June of last year. 3 Republicans, Susan Collins, Lindsey Graham, and Lisa Murkowski, voted yes. All right, let's turn now to the state legislature. A bill to get rid of Indiana's handgun permit requirement hit a surprising roadblock this week. A marathon hearing, including testimony from the state's top officer, ended with the bill being gutted. News 8's Garrett Berquist looks at what happened and what happens next.
A Senate panel completely rewrote the bill. Instead of repealing the concealed carry permit requirement, it would have allowed someone to carry without a permit for up to 90 days if they had already applied for a permit. Senate President Pro Tem Roderick Bray said the panel did that too close to the deadline.
The idea that is in that bill about permitless carry, or however it may be moved through here in the Senate, will carry on. I think what we'll end up trying to do is taking a bill that is that has gone through the House and through the Senate, do a strip and insert and add that language into that bill, and then debate it here on the floor of the Senate, debate it over in the House, and see if it can move. Don't have any ability to tell you exactly what form that will be in. We'll continue to debate and discuss that. It's a little ironic at after about 8.5 or 9 hours of testimony that he says it's not an opportunity to fully vet something. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for Superintendent Carter, along with the entire state police and the job that they do. And they absolutely have a huge part of the conversation in this bill. I know they have concerns about it. We've been involved in those conversations with them for a long time, over years, in fact.
What makes this a priority? This wasn't on Senate Republican agenda, yet this is something where we're going to find a home to put it in.
Well, you know, it's important to people. It's important to people. I mean, people feel passionately about it, whether they are for it or against it. I know a lot of our members have a lot of constituents that are contacting them and want this to move forward. So we're going to try and tackle it.
One of the criticisms during that hearing yesterday was the fact that some people said I shouldn't have to get government permission to exercise a constitutional right. What about voting? Because you got to have an ID, you got to register.
Well, every constitutional right that we have is, it has some time and place restrictions. Voting is an example of that. You know, you have to get a permit sometimes to assemble in a public street. So, this is, just because it's a constitutional right doesn't mean you can't have some reasonable restrictions or time and place restrictions on it.
Do you personally support permitless carry as it came out of the House?
I would vote for it, yes.
You know, I can tell you this. I was very proud of our law enforcement, at least most of them, except for the one that told me that you stop a man with a gun. The one that stop a man with a gun is with somebody else with another gun. And he's a elected law enforcement officer. But I thought the most compelling arguments that I heard last night were from Superintendent Carter, and I think he was right on point. He said, listen, if you vote for this legislation the way it was, that's a vote against law enforcement. Law enforcement was there. The blue was there last night. And for a party that always talks about Democrats being against blue, they were totally against law enforcement. So if that bill goes forward, this so-called permitless carry, it's against law enforcement. Let's be real about it. The supermajority, as they know a lot what that means, of law enforcement agencies across the state are not for this legislation. And Superintendent Carter, being the chief law enforcement officer in the state of Indiana, said he represented 18,000 law enforcement officers. And that doesn't seem to stop them from wanting to pursue this.
So beginning this week, all eyes will be on the conference committees that resolve differences between House and Senate versions of bills. There is time to tinker. Lawmakers have until March 14th to adjourn, though leaders in both chambers say they'd like to wrap up sooner if they can. At the State House, Garrett Bergquist, Wish TV, wishtv.com, and follow us on Facebook.
Coming up, our political experts debate the Supreme Court pick and the political fight over the U.S. response to Ukraine. That's next on All Indiana Politics. And welcome back to All Indiana Politics on this Sunday as we welcome back Republican Allie Bartlett and Democrat Kip Tew. Good to see you both. Let's start with that Russian invasion into Ukraine. Kip, I want to go to you first on this one. Rate the U.S. and the Biden administration's response to the invasion, if you can.
Well, we're not going to know, I think, for a while, whether what they did in advance helped. They kind of did some unprecedented things by releasing what was classified information out front, so the rest of the world knew what Putin was up to. And it turns out that our intelligence agencies knew what was happening, and they told folks. And I think as we look at it sitting here today, it is helpful. It gave Ukrainians some advance warning of what was possible, and they look like, with the resistance that they have shown so far in the first 2 days, that it might be helpful. I think President Biden deserves enormous credit for helping the world react and bringing NATO together and trying as he can to get consensus on the international sanctions that have been issued. It's going to take fortitude going forward, but this president has more experience than any president sitting in the office when it comes to these things, and I think he's the right man for the job at this time in history.
Allie, does President Biden deserve credit for how we've handled this so far?
Credit, yes, but in a positive way, I would say no. First and foremost, though, I do agree with Congressman Bucshon's comments that it's not necessarily right or fair to place blame on any one person in a situation like this. All I can say is that, in my eyes, foreign policy and military policy and international relations have a domino effect. And when we've exhibited weakness and poor decision-making in situations like Afghanistan back in August, it exhibits weakness to the world. And things like this happen in a cause and effect manner. And so for that reason, I don't believe that President Biden has done the right thing up until this point, including starting things off with very weak sanctions that didn't provide any help. They may have made the situation worse in some ways. And so in that way, I just feel like the weakness has not been a good thing.
Phil, since
Go ahead, Kip. Jump in there. Yep. The sanctions,
yeah,
I think, is a big topic. Go ahead.
Yes, since she attacked the president and and tried to call him weak, it's very offensive, especially at this moment in history. It wasn't Joe Biden who has been kissing the behind of Vladimir Putin, one of the worst human beings that ever existed on planet Earth, for 4 years of his presidency, and before that was Donald Trump. That was Donald Trump.
That there was not,
and it was you did attack him. You called him weak.
Really
and in Afghanistan,
President Trump, that's offensive, and it's actually just ridiculous because President Trump.
Kip, go ahead, finish up, and then we'll move on to another topic here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, with Afghanistan, it was Donald Trump who signed the agreement with the Taliban for the exit date, and Joe Biden had to clean up that mess.
Still trying to blame President Trump for issues that are happening under the Biden
You said the weakness was Afghanistan, and I'm telling you what the facts were. It was Taliban
I can tell you
agreement with Trump.
Joe Biden is the president right now, and he's exhibited weakness and incompetence throughout his presidency on all of these issues, foreign policy and military decisions.
Before we move on to the other topic of the day, guys.
Yes, please, let us.
Kip, quick question for you from me, Kip, okay? He did say, I believe it was on Thursday, that the sanctions weren't meant to deter Putin. That was a misstep. Would you not think that? Would you go as far as saying that? Because there was he did say that.
I'm not following. The president has been working with the international community to try to put the biggest sanctions on that he possibly can. The unfortunate thing is when you put these sanctions on, you got to get consensus.
Right.
And he has done his level best to do that.
Okay. All right, well, we'll see what happens with the next round of sanctions. Hopefully they work. So the U.S. Supreme Court nomination, I want to talk about that today. The president on Friday named Ketanji Brown Jackson as his choice. Allie, I'll go with you on this one. Will Republicans try to block her confirmation? And should they try to block her nomination?
Well, first and foremost, I think to her credit, she has an amazing track record. Obviously, she exhibits some amazing qualifications for this position. So congratulations to her for being the nominee. I think that, as you heard from both senators, U.S. senators from Indiana, I think that Republicans will do the right thing and fairly consider her record and will take the time to, consider her fairly. I haven't heard her testimony. I haven't done any research into her, so I can't say whether or not she will be blocked or if there will be an attempt to block her. All I can say is that Republicans are going to give her the respect that she deserves, the way that many did not give that same respect to Justice Barrett when she went through this process.
And that's what they said. Kip, we have 45 seconds left. Take us home.
Well, I think it is a great historic, and I think all Americans should be proud of the fact that we've finally broken that ceiling. It's long overdue. She has an impeccable record. The Republicans say they're going to give them respect, but we'll wait to see whether that happens or not. And when it comes to whether people have given respect, Merrick Garland was up for an entire year. They wouldn't give him a hearing. They wouldn't even talk to him. So, whether Amy Coney Barrett, who was pushed in the last minute, deserved the respect at that point, I don't know, because it was we Democrats feel like
she didn't deserve
we
respect.
had 2 seats stolen from us.
Statement.
So.
I think she deserved respect. I think everyone in that position
we'll
deserves
leave it there.
respect.
Happy Sunday, guys. We'll talk soon. Thank you very much, and we'll be right back.
Take All Indiana Politics on the go with you. Download our podcast now. Part of the All Indiana Podcast Network and allindianapodcastnetwork.com.
And thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics this week. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. We'll also be at the state capitol this week as lawmakers get into the final stretch of the legislative session. Have a great rest of your weekend, and of course, we'll keep you posted on everything happening abroad and in Ukraine. Much more on that on WishTV.com.